Hey there. In this video, we are going to go ahead and learn about manipulating our virtual camera. So if you want to follow along, let's go ahead and get started. You should probably still be in the Brunelleschi Loja 481 starter model. So we'll just keep going. Okay, so what we did in the last video is we learned how to save or name a view in Rhino. And what we're going to do now is we're going to learn a little bit more about manipulating our camera. Okay, thus far we've just been sort of zooming in or zooming out, and that can be a little problematic. It's also a little haphazard because you never really know where your eye level line is, where the station point is, what you're really looking at, things like that. And what we can do is we can actually add or manipulate a virtual camera, so we can decide where we're standing, what we're looking at, what the angle of our lens is, how wide it is, what our focal distance is, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that right now. So a couple things you should know about. Number one, you should probably make sure you have a separate layer that says camera. If not, what happens is a lot of times you'll have another layer that's active, and then you'll turn on your camera, and your camera will end up being on that layer. And then what happens is you end up snapping to everything. And so after a while, you realize, yeah, I'm going to lock all my other layers so they don't snap to things, but then you realize that you just locked your camera and then you have to move it around. It's kind of a pain. So if you just remember, make your active layer a camera layer, and that will help you out. Okay, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave those all locked, and we're going to go ahead and start our camera. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you are actively using your perspective window. Make sure that is active, and then once you're there, you can go ahead. The hotkey to turn on your camera is simply F6, but you can find it by going into View, and then it'll say Set Camera, and then from there I'll actually go down to Show Camera. You can't really see it, but that is sort of the pathway that you need to take. Or again, the hotkey is F6. So I'm going to go ahead and click there. And you can see what just happened is now you see in the top view, there's this little thing that looks a lot like a spotlight. Okay, and in the front view, if we move to the side, there's your camera. And in the right view, we can actually see there's your camera as well. You can't see the camera in the perspective view, and the reason for that is you are holding the camera, or you're the viewer, so you're holding the camera, or maybe you actually are the camera, so you can't see yourself. So there are a few different points here that we need to concern ourselves with. Okay, one of which, in fact, I'm going to take my camera and I'm going to slide it over here a little bit, and whoop, now that brings us up to an important point. I'll show you that in a minute. Let's go ahead and make that look a little bit interesting anyway. So as you can see, watch this. As I'm moving around my camera, you can see it's actually snapping to all kinds of different things, and that's why my perspective is jumping around. And so that was something I wanted to warn you about. And so right now, I'm going to move that back. I'm going to go ahead and disable my snaps, and now I can go ahead and I can move this thing around. All right, so what I'm moving right now is actually called the target point, meaning that's what you're looking at. So that might be a good reason to actually have your snaps on if you have a point in your model that you really want to snap to. But I'm going to go ahead and move it right there. So that's the target point, or what it is that you're looking at. If you manipulate it in the top view, it's always going to stay at the same level. That's true of any of these points. They'll always stay at the same level. Okay. That being said, if I grab it from the right or the front view, I can actually move it up and down. So I can make it look like I'm looking up. I can make it look like I'm looking down. Okay, so just like so. And that looks pretty cool right there. Okay, now the next point that we probably want to concern ourselves with is this one here. And I call that, well, that's actually your camera, but we call that the station point, meaning that's where you're standing. Okay, and this is your cone of vision. That's what you can see. So as I move my station point closer or farther, you notice that, well, my view gets different. It gets closer, it gets farther, changes how wide it is. Okay, and you notice as I begin to move around left or right, my target point remains the same. So I'm keeping an eye on that exact object. I'm just looking at it from different angles. Okay. So again, this is something to think about. If you're designing something, you want to say, well, how does that object or how does that part of the building look from this part of the city or this part of the room? Or how does it look from this part of the building or from this corner on the street? Okay. So this is a great, great tool that a lot of people don't really take advantage of. All right. So we've looked at the station point. We've looked at the target point. The next point here is we're going to call this the dolly point. That's what that point is called on the spotlight. So I'm just going to continue on with that terminology. And that's basically, it acts exactly like a dolly. Okay, I can move forward. I can move back. Keeps things more or less in line. Left or right. Okay, obviously sometimes you run into some trouble. You'll hit some walls and whatnot. All right. Now, we looked at the target point earlier. There's another point that's directly above it, which is used for rotation. That can be kind of problematic, okay, especially if you're up here and you click on it. Now I've actually got 2 points, and it doesn't tell me which is the target point and which is the rotation point. Let's see if I can screw this up. All right. Let's hope I grab the rotation point. But what happens is you'll grab that point, you'll start to move it around. You thought you had your target point, and nope. If you look in the perspective, you notice I'm actually rotating my thing. And now it's completely, well, bad. And you can't really do any Control-Z's. You can't really do any undos to fix that. The only thing you can really do is click back here, go back to a name view, and fix it. Or the other option is, remember, this camera is an object, right? So we're going to be able to manipulate this camera using our object properties window. So if I click here under the object properties window, make sure I'm in the perspective window, and I go to rotation, you notice right now it's at 37.1 degrees. Okay, so I'm just going to type in rotation is 0, and I'm going to hit enter, and that fixes that bad boy right up. So that's good to know. Okay, so we've looked at the target point, the rotation point, the dolly point, and the station point. Now, over here, we have another point. Right there. Okay, and what this one does is that basically affects your focal distance or your cone of vision. So watch this. As I begin to move this in and out, okay, that changes my focal point or my cone of vision. It gets wider and smaller. Okay, the wider it gets, the farther it makes it appear, or it makes it appear as if I'm farther away, but really what that's doing is just widening things out. Now, this can be very useful if you are, say, inside. Let's see if we can't fix this. If you're actually inside something and the perspective is a tad distorted, manipulating this and zooming in can actually fix that. And I think that's kind of a complicated thing to just toss it in at the end of the lesson. So let's go ahead and we'll stop this lesson right here, and in the next lesson we're going to show you a few more things about our virtual camera. Okay, thanks very much. See you soon.